Hey, welcome back to Boards 2D. I'm Kurt and today we're making a shelf with a French cleat. It truly couldn't be a project by Boards 2D if something were not to go wrong. This time, unfortunately, it's my mistake and I forgot to press the play button, or rather the record button on the GoPro when I started filming the project. Luckily, the footage that was lost was not crucial. It's basically the cutting of the plywood bases. It's very simple, using the table saw, and making the cutting of 2x4s into French cleats. Basically, French cleats are a way to hold furniture or shelves, or floating shelves in many cases, against the wall without actually using fasteners like hooks or anchors or something of the sort. However, you would still need to use anchors, in our case here in Malta, to fasten the cleats to the wall. The good thing about it is that a French cleat is easily removable, in the sense that if a shelf, such as this one over here, say I want to remove it completely and redo it, it's very easy to just pull it up, redo it and put it back in. One thing to note is that the French cleat by itself is not enough to hold the shelf up. So you need to fashion some sort of supports, just like I have done over here. These are made out of scrap 2x4s which I had lying around the shop, and I just gave them a couple of cuts at an angle using the miter saw and the table saw in combination to give them some sort of pleasant aesthetic. I started by sawing a piece of 2x4 along the grain at a 45-degree angle. This formed the French cleat. The bottom half will be stuck to the wall, while the top half will be attached to the shelf face. The face of the shelf was made from 5/8" plywood scraps that were left over from the workbench and table saw sled builds. The supports were designed in a J fashion and made from 2x4s stripped down to thinner widths. I used the miter saw to cut them at another 45-degree angle to give them an interesting geometry. I clamped a stop block to my cross-cut sled and cut half of the 2x4 blocks to a shorter length. The edge grain of these 2x4s was not planed, so I decided to cut them off with a miter saw. This process defined the final width of the support structures, and also gave them a clean edge, which looks nice. Since the longer halves of the support brackets did not fit in my miter saw, I used my cross-cut sled to chop off the rough edges. I was as careful as possible, using a piece of wood to ensure that the 2x4 would not magically fly up to my face, and push gently on the sled, ensuring to stay away from the blade's exit point. Finally, I finished all the table saw work that I had to do for this project. I don't think I have anything else to use the table saw for, so that's a sigh of relief for me. It's not that I hate using it, it's just it scares me. Anyway, it's a spinning blade of death. As you just saw, it's a lot of running back and forth between the miter saw and the table saw. I had vague plans of what I want to do, but as always, I change plans halfway through the process. Anyway, the blocks I needed were these. Now, of course, you can use 2x4s like I used. You can use 1x6s. You can use whatever kind of dimensional lumber that you have available. So anyway, I use these because these are scraps. I have them available in the shop and I want to get rid of them to start making more space for, better woods, etc, etc. So the idea of these blocks is that they will be glued in this orientation. And if the shelf sits on top, okay, you'll have the cleat, rather this way, the cleat somewhere around here with the table, with the shelf on top. So actually what I just realized is that what I need to do next is cut this face. Now ideally you would use a planer or a jointer, actually a jointer for this kind of thing. I do not have one. I can make a jig for the router. Don't feel like doing it today. That will be maybe a project for another video. But so what I'm doing really is I'm just sawing off the rough edges. It leaves a cleanish edge, enough for a good glue up at least. It's not the best, but then again I'm not making heirloom furniture. So given the tools and given the time that I have available at my disposal, I'm quite happy with going for this method. So yeah, let's get to it. After precariously propping my camera in the sink, I used my belt sander to sand all the various pieces of wood I needed before the final glue up. I wanted everything to be smooth to the touch. This avoids getting splinters and makes everything look much nicer. After machine sanding, I used 280 grit sandpaper and hand sanded everything for a silky smooth finish. Once that was done, I used the Craig drill bit to drill a hole that I could later use to fasten the two parts of the support brackets together. I put glue at the joints and used Craig screws to hold them tightly together while the glue dried. This hole was made at the back of the support bracket, so it is hidden, but if you like you can always plug the hole up with dowels, trim it and sand it flush. I filed the sharp edges of the shelf faces and sanded everything with 280 grit sandpaper until it was smooth and without any splinters. I drilled and countersunk holes through the shelf face and attached the upper part of the French cleat. After marking the exact placement of the support bracket, I drilled holes from the bottom of the shelf and countersunk from the top. I drilled screws in from the top, just enough so that they would leave a mark on the bracket when pressed together. Using this mark, I drilled holes in the bracket to make sure it doesn't split, put glue, and fastened everything with screws. Following the same steps, I attached the second bracket to the same shelf. After doing all this again, I finally finished the two shelves. Making a couple of these shelves made me realize how simple and easy something like this can be. It doesn't need to be fancy, it doesn't need to be overly complicated, it just is a couple of French cleats, plywood base, and a couple of support struts just to hold everything together. It's a perfect project for a beginner woodworker. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber here, consider subscribing to see more of my projects available on my channel and future uploads which I'll be putting up on YouTube. And you can also follow me on social media such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or just go to my website borscht3d.net. Just as I have been inspired by other makers out there to come down to the shop and make something, I hope that you too can be inspired to make something yourselves. Because everyone is a maker.